No. She gave us the thumb today. Well, yeah, welcome, guys. It's Tuesday. It's 7 o'clock if you're in Eastern Standard Time. If you're in Singapore, I think it's 7 a.m. But we're back to interviews. The last several weeks, you've seen a number of artists provide some demonstrations, and we're going to get back to you on that. But today we're in Louis. Is it Louisville? Is that how everybody pronounces it? Is that the correct
Everybody
way?
thinks Louisville, but
yeah,
no, Louisville.
Louisville,
yep.
Which is down in the greater Canton area, right?
Correct.
And we're here talking with Kurt Rogers, and his wife Heather is here. My wife Beth is here, and so they're joining us too, but you can't see them on screen. But if you share tonight, and we encourage you to share, if you share, we're going to put your name into a drawing, and then next week we are going to draw a name, and we're going to mail this out. To tell us what this is.
One of my bread and butter things is I like to make bottle stoppers, and this is one that I've actually poured the epoxy. What's inside of that is a sweet gum pod, just a tree pod that falls off that holds the seeds of the tree, but it's actually inside of that, and when it opens up it has a really unique appearance. It gives it a really cool feel. So
yeah. But take a look at this. Can you see that little kind of honeycomb shape in there? That's amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Don't know. There we go.
Well, if you win it, you'll see
I'll be
it.
able to see
right?
some details.
Exactly.
Thanks for that. So, thank you guys for joining us tonight. Again, if you share it, there should be a share button down at the bottom of your screen. You could share it to a group. You could share it to your friends list. You could also share it in Messenger to a specific person, because you might say, oh, this is the perfect one for so-and-so to see, and you could share it to just one. But as people click on, let us know that you can hear us, because we have our mic hanging here. We just always do a quick sound check, and then we're going to jump right into the conversation, because we are straight up at 7 o'clock. We try to be punctual. Any thumbs up on the sound? All right, if you don't hear the sound, let us know. We discovered that we're both Kent State graduates, and Heather too. And so my question to start off our interview is, and this is almost embarrassing because for me, because it strikes home. Did you ever volunteer for a psych experiment at Kent? And if so,
Which one?
I mean, did you go in there, tear off the little thing, and get paid your $30?
Yeah.
Did you do it?
It was a super simple, just basic survey that they were putting out, but it wasn't anything like experiments or anything like that. So, but just kind of a survey. I think it was basically around just kind of your upbringing and the direction that you're wanting to go future in your life. So, ironic, but hey.
You filled out a survey and you got paid $20, $25, something like that.
I think 5 or something.
5?
Maybe 10 if I remember correctly. But
I pulled one of those slots and I called in, and I think I got paid $20, and I had to drink a glass full of liquid, and it was 1 or 2, and then they hooked me up to electrodes.
nice.
And I was competing against somebody that I couldn't see. So I was in a room, and what would happen is we were sitting there, your hands were like this, and as soon as you saw a light, you had to hit the like a button.
Simon Says.
Yeah. So you're just waiting there, and the light would go on. You hit the button, and if you beat your opponent, who you didn't see, and then they would receive the shock that you elected for them. Now, if they beat us, we would receive the shock they elected for us. And so it became this dial-up, the competition thing, but it was the effects of alcohol and amphetamines on competition. So that was I mean, I remember that like crazy. So here you
Nice.
were a psych
Nice.
major at Kent.
It was the 80s. I don't know if there was a bit of a difference there.
That was the 80s. I don't remember signing any type of waiver, and I was drinking strange green fluid
Yeah, probably
out of a
not.
cup.
It's frowned upon.
So yeah.
Yeah, they apparently made it a lot softer as you went to the future.
Go Kent.
2003.
And I know there's a lot of people who watch their Kent State graduates or went to class there, or even have some Kent State instructors that keep an eye on us. So thanks for sharing that with us. Tell us, so I always like to kind of start conversations and kind of reflect back. When in those, and the reason being is I think that very often people can look back and pinpoint maybe very exact or generally talk about like where creativity began in their lives. So where did that begin with you?
Honestly, I've always been very artistic. I was really big into art class and stuff throughout high school. I did a lot of drawing and things like that. Even in like 7th and 8th grade, I actually won 2nd place in the county for one of my drawings. So I've always kind of been very artsy, but I consider myself semi-ambidextrous. I actually write left-handed, but I do everything else right-handed. Very strange. So I was always very excelling at math, but I was also really good in the arts. So math and science was really easy for me, but arts were really easy for me too. So it's kind of a weird thing. So I kind of really enjoy both aspects. I'm a very numbers-oriented person, so that's kind of where the turning gives me the whole more technical aspect of things. But I love the artistic freedom to actually express yourself with that too. So really I can't pinpoint an exact moment, but truly I've always been delved into the arts, and that's something that's always been really important to me. So
yeah. And if you are creeping on Kurt Rogers' Facebook page, you'll see some long hair and some guitar, which he played some bass and some. Was it acoustic? Did I say acoustic guitar, or was that just bass?
That was in high school.
Okay.
I tried to go down the realm of guitar after learning how to play bass, but the fretboard is drastically different size-wise, so it's not a huge adjustment, but it's just something that I never really adapted to really well. So bass was just always what I liked, and I'm the guy with the subwoofer in his car that just likes to feel it. I like to feel the bass. So.
You ever play the upright bass?
I actually have a couple times. It wasn't mine, but I had the opportunity to, and it's quite different, but it's really cool. It's really nice. I like the older school stuff like that too. So
Yeah. Well, it is not unusual that we, like I think many other artists, find themselves just we're generally creative, and so we move through different things during our life. But tell us where I read in your business card and even your sign back here reads Lathe Turned Functional Art. So unpack that for us, because that seems self-explanatory, but unpack that.
Sure. The reason I went with that description is I really fought on a lot of different directions to go with the way I would describe how I want to portray my business, because it's amazing how many people, it's such a commonplace for me that not a lot of people know what a lathe is. So I was trying to get the point across, but a lot of people with a lathe tend to, I don't like to use the word pigeonhole, but a lot of guys tend to focus, I turn specifically pens, or I turn specifically bowls. I kind of wanted to open up the whole realm, and you can kind of see everything behind me.
Yeah.
That was kind of my outlet, the way that I could express things. So I wanted it to be very artistic, but I wanted it to be functional. So that's why I went bottle stoppers to start off with. It gave me that little bit of a realm, but it was still something tangible that somebody could pick up and know that they could have a daily use for. Sometimes when people pick up my bowls, they're like, oh, that is amazing. I just can't picture how I would use that or where I'd have that in my house. So I wanted it to be functional art, but I wanted it to be expressive. So just things that you hear. So I wanted it to be able to be portrayed to the public in a way that they would maybe understand a little bit more clear. So Like, I build a lot of crazy things. That's something that I'll be making into an epoxy pour, but it's all kinds of little marine life, and I do a lot of underwater scenes and things like that. So another thing is a lot of guys that do lathe turning just strictly do wood or strictly do one sector. I kind of like to delve into every which direction when I'm doing this. So whatever I open up gives me the opportunity to kind of display what I'm doing. So I guess the point is I just really wanted it to be something that people aren't just buying to display, that they could be using. Mm-hmm. So that's what I really try to do. So do jewelry, I do some pins occasionally, but that's really not my specialty. So,
and we're going to have a chance to talk to Kurt about his workspace. We're going to actually walk up the steps, go out to the garage, and check out where the wood is and where some of the loud arts and creation happens. You guys don't see this, but as we'll turn at some point, we'll look at some of the work that you have, and I hope you don't mind, but I'm going to ask you guys some business questions too, because there's a lot of folks that they take a look at, I'm an artist and I just don't know what to do with it, and so maybe you guys can answer some questions and give us some pointers along the way. So, always an artist, you were doing a lot of drawing, crank it out on the bass. Mm-hmm. Early on, long hair, right? And Heather and Kurt are high school sweethearts, so she was right there when that hair was.
But I still had hair.
But somewhere along the way, you were like, lathe, and I'm assuming wood. You're probably early on, and so where did that happen, and how did that creativity kind of funnel into
narrow down,
and then how that brought you up to kind of focusing on business here?
To really delve in, basically to where the beginning of it was, I had a friend in high school that his dad did wood turning. They actually had a contract with the Major League Baseball turning their baseball bats. Mm-hmm. So it was a pretty big business that they had running out of Marshallville, and they had to do all kinds of training for that. Not to delve too far, but basically I stayed all night with my friend in high school. I was like 13 years old, so I guess maybe middle school. But his dad did the wood turning then, and he had let me experiment on his wood lathe that one night when I was about 13 years old. And from that point, something just kind of clicked in the back of my mind that I absolutely love that. I love symmetry. I love, if you understand how a lathe works, everything is perfectly round, everything is perfectly symmetrical. So, but that just clicked in the back of my mind. And fast forward to when I was 38 years old, something finally clicked in me that said, I really, really want a lathe. So Christmas of 2018, I got my first lathe. From that, it became truly kind of an obsession. I was out there till 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night sometimes after work, and it's the first thing I'd think about in the morning was going back out and playing around. But I'm basically started from that one moment in time when I was 13 years old. Fast forward, that kind of brought us to this point. So it wasn't something that I necessarily imagined was going to become a business, but I started to do a lot of turning and trying to grow myself. A lot of guys are fortunate enough to be maybe in a class or something where they learned how to do it. I just threw myself in and I taught myself. So it was just something that I was so obsessed with that I wanted to learn that I would just seek out all the different avenues to learn. So YouTube videos, books, anything that I could find to kind of explain the process. So the more I turned, the more people at work would be like, hey, what'd you do last night? And I'd show them pictures, and they're like, so how much do you think you'd charge for one of those? And from that point, it just kind of built up to a point that people were constantly just buying my little one-offs, and it just kind of built from there. And then one day we said, hey, let's go set up at the Hartville Flea Market and see how this turns out. So, so basically I was only, about 5 months into turning at the point. Mm-hmm. So, but the thing about me is I'm a big perfectionist, so I really wanted to hone those skills and make sure it was good enough to put out there to the public, not something I'd be embarrassed about, and I always hold myself to that that high standard on all my products. So,
Yeah.
but really it just kind of snowballed from that point. We set up one weekend, let's seek out another show. And basically the first year we did a show every single weekend from May all the way up till Christmas, selling all my products. So
That's a lot.
it takes a lot of dedication, takes a lot of traveling, but it was really cool to be able to get your stuff out there and display it and see people embrace it. So
Yeah.
that's not something that I expected, but it was awesome, and it kind of justified your choice to go down that direction. So,
Yeah.
but
We actually met Heather and Kurt. We were at was it the Peninsula? I remember what's
Peninsula Flea.
The Peninsula Flea.
Call
Yeah.
it Flea, but
It's
a little bit more of a higher
Yeah, I'm
class show.
surprised they
So
called it a flea.
Yeah.
But at Heritage Farms in
Yeah.
Peninsula.
Yeah, and it was a handful of weeks ago, and we moved through the different vendors, and we saw your work, and as we learned about, I mean, I don't know whether we pick the piece or the piece picks us.
Pieces.
Pieces. Oh, that's right. Two pieces.
Let's
And
be
Beth
Thank
would
you.
have bought more. I don't know whether we choose the pieces or the pieces choose us. But we were drawn to two pieces, and it was we were talking to both about that work, and the reason that I felt drawn to that those bowls, right? And one was that a
Vase.
one was that was it a vase?
Yes.
It was taller. I'm just like I'm thinking about putting flowers. I'm just like, look at that thing.
Right.
But as we were, as Kurt and Heather were sharing with us, kind of what went into choosing the wood to put on the lathe, to turn, and then how to bring out that grain in that look, which was, I mean, they were very different. One was natural, and one was, was
a little more ornate.
Ornate, yeah. I mean, it was great, but to hear them talk about that work and what goes into choosing the wood was a reason I was like, we've got to call these guys and go down to their studio and learn more. So we're excited to do that. If you're watching now, if you share this, we're going to draw a name next week, and then we're going to mail out whoever gets drawn out of the hat next week will get this this bottle stopper. Kurt's
And you can't see it, but it has beautiful. My brain just
Glitter,
blanked out.
sparkle.
Thank you. Yeah, epoxy.
Yeah,
It's gorgeous.
Yeah, you'll love it. So it's functional art. I mean, you'll get to enjoy the art, and you'll hold it and look at it, and then you could put it in a wine bottle or
Not to give another name drop, but the one thing that I always really prided myself on is choosing quality products to go with what I make. So we get the bases of these from somebody out of Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, cool.
She owns her own business that she built from the ground up, found a CNC shop that would produce her products. But it's solid stainless steel, and she puts a lifetime warranty on these. So I'm not just going to put my stuff on just your basic stuff, because what a lot of people don't realize is normal wine stoppers will corrode really quickly, and they can really change the flavors, can really mess with the wines. So this has been proven over, I think she's been in business almost 40 years now.
Yeah.
So it's a long proven situation. So
Good point.
I like to give a shout out on her because she's a really good person. And to go back a little bit, the other thing that I really looked at when I was trying to learn the turning process is joining a lot of closed Facebook groups. What was really cool is a lot of the bigger people were taking note of my stuff too, and she actually caught, and I have a lot of pieces on her gallery page on her website. So another justification, it was just really cool that some of the higher ups, the more experienced veterans of turning, were taking note in what I was doing and realized, and even she's ordered a couple pieces from me. So that was kind of really cool.
Nice.
And I'm interested. Just give us a quick 30 or 60 second talk about a closed Facebook group.
Sure.
Because I'm a big fan of that. I mean, it's to gather together and learn and discuss and share and connect with, network and connect with, right?
Absolutely.
People making.
Yeah, the closed groups that I joined were all wood turning, or finding really cool wood and sharing the grains of the wood. But basically it's a big artist community that comes together and just wants to share what they've made, share their knowledge, and support people throughout the process. The nice thing is they're usually policed very well, so you don't get your trolls, for lack of a better term, coming in and just trying to put people down, because a lot of them are starters that don't need that. They need the support. So that's what I thought was really cool, was a lot of the groups are just incredibly supportive.
Yeah.
And having seen Tuesday at 7 page, I know that it's very supportive to other artists, and that's awesome. So
yeah, so if you're watching and you're not part of Tuesday at 7, TUES, the @ sign at 7 with no spaces, feel free to join. It's a closed group, but we accept everybody. And everybody has been really well behaved and supportive in that community, and we thank you for that. But one of the things that we do is we try to interconnect artists of a bunch of different areas together, and so it's a hybrid of creative folks, and so there's a lot of collaboration, but we haven't had anybody that's done lathe turned artwork. So if you have any questions, just shoot it out, and we'll take those kind of as they come up. When we get to a good pause, feel free to ask those questions. But take us, and we're going to ask some questions about business as well, kind of along the way. But take us back here and tell us kind of where things start and such.
So basically, when I started turning, I was just using wood. I was finding any little scraps, any little pieces, and in those closed groups, I started seeing people turning epoxy stuff, which that really intrigued me, and a whole other avenue of trying to express yourself. So so the epoxy really jumped out to me as something that I could tangibly put together a little scene or a little something. So I kind of started building all these little items and dioramas and things like that I actually put into the epoxy. But not to go too deep into the process, but basically epoxy is just a two-part, a hardener and the actual epoxy. So you have to mix those together. The epoxy naturally will produce bubbles because it actually gets up to almost 200 degrees while it's going through its process of curing. And this big guy here is a pressure pot. It's something that you actually modify. It's a spray paint apparatus, but you basically plug all the holes, run compressed air in. What that does is compress all the bubbles of the epoxy down and makes it crystal clear. So it's something that I didn't originally try, but I found very quickly that you have to do that, especially if you're turning, because it'll make things chip out, blow out all over the place. Just makes your life a whole lot easier. So
you grab the two parts, right? You put them together. Are they 1-to-1? Is that, or is it? What
I use is 1-to-1. Some are by weight, some are by volume, but mine is by volume. So
about 1-to-1. You pour them into, are they molds, or what do you pour that epoxy into?
Sure. So basically, these are just little paint mix-up cups, and they're nice. They give you all the graduated little measurements on those, so you can get your exact measurement, because if you're off even the slightest bit, it won't set correctly.
Is this epoxy here?
This is the epoxy.
Oh, gotcha.
So you basically mix those two together. I started using just barbecue, the spears for like kebabs.
Oh, yeah.
And I found, and I like to do a lot of clear stuff. I found that I would get chip outs and different things, so I'd find a little floater of wood sitting in the perfectly clear thing that I just created, and it would just, in my mind, ruin it. But but a lot of people still appreciated it. So so I actually switched over. These are lollipop sticks that you can buy in the bakery section.
Oh.
And they're just kind of a cardboard, so it's, you don't get anything falling off, you don't get anything disintegrating while you're actually mixing everything up. So, but timer is very important. Basically, time everything out. You have to mix it for a solid 5 minutes. At that point, I pour it into another container, add my different colors. So these are called mica powders. They're basically the same as what you would use for makeup, but they give all the glitter, the different colorings to the epoxy. So it's inherently blue, or clear, excuse me. But if I want to make it blue, green, purple, whatever color,
right in.
You add these, and that's what gives you the color.
Now, in the middle of this is this
Sweet gum pod.
sweet gum pod, which you just go out and gather them up, right, and bring them in.
Actually do a lot of hiking, so I go out. If something weird catches my eye, I like to play around with that. Kind of over the course, I became the bug guy.
Yeah.
So I collect dead bugs. I don't kill anything, but I collect the dead bugs that I find. And some people are totally grossed out, but a lot of people find them really fascinating and really cool. So,
To put them in an epoxy, right?
Correct.
Because you have an example of one that...
unfortunately went awry.
But
I became the bee guy. That was my favorite thing to actually do. Now this one I didn't mix correctly, unfortunately, so it never sat, so it stays soft and it stays very sticky. You'll always leave your fingerprints in it, so it had to be abandoned, unfortunately, but I've done quite a few more, and the bees have always been a really popular thing. So if the mix had been correct, it would be perfectly clear, perfectly solid as a rock, because epoxy basically is turned into plastic once it cures. So it's a very solid, durable product once it's in its cured state. So,
and you would mix that in a rectangular mold, and then
yeah. After I mix it up in the original cup that I showed, these are what's called HDPE. It's literally just cutting board material. Now I tried to make my own originally. You can never get it quite perfect, and I found myself having hot glue will keep the epoxy from rolling out of the edges of it. I had to glue it every single time that I started, but I found a gentleman that makes these, and it was well worth the investment of having a good solid mold because it doesn't leak. It's CNC machined down to perfect specs. So, but
cutting boards. So kitchen cutting boards, and they build the molds of the kitchen cutting boards. And do they do that because of the heat?
Heat, yes, but actually for some reason, and I don't know the molecular reason, but the HDPE does not stick to the epoxy. You may have to knock it a little bit to get it off of there, but it doesn't adhere. And I started out using PVC pipe, so just a straight white PVC pipe. I'll really open up the world of how far I delved into it. These are all different molds and variants of things that I've tried over time.
The experiments.
Silicone is actually, so these are your baking silicone molds for breads, different things. It does not stick to this at all. It's amazing. So you can just pop your piece right out of it when you're done. So there's really no mess or fuss of having to take, 20 screws out of this to be able to take everything out.
Is the silicone harder with the bigger, heavier piece?
Yes,
like it doesn't
because
give
it
enough...
wants to flex, and then things don't come out really well, or it'll push out like this and be really oblong and thrown off. So, and it degrades over time. So I've had it actually eventually over a certain period of time. You'll get pieces start chunking out, and it just kind of degrades. So that's the downfall, but the good thing is it comes right out.
Yeah. You know what's interesting is in special effects, we use some silicone special effects brushes, etc., but we build mother molds. So we would take the silicone, we drop it into a rigid mother mold, and then we just take out the silicone, take it out, and then drop it back into that rigid mother mold too. So,
how many uses would you get out of the silicone before it would start degrading?
It probably really depends on the quality of what you originally got, the thickness of it. These were actually ones that I did a lot of my original bottle stoppers in. I'd say I probably got like 20, maybe 25 pours out of that before it actually started to really degrade. So I bought some new ones because I do still really like to use them.
Yeah.
But I've really faded over to the cutting board material to actually keep the longevity and the quality.
Yeah.
Then I got connected with a lot of guys. So this is actually one for specifically bottle stoppers. So it was actually just poured. But this is just if you're doing colored epoxy and getting mixed colors, different things like that. But yeah, the molds ended up being really cool. Then, like, this is a crazy piece that I'm working on right now. This is a 5" by 5" mold. This is a big chunk of walnut, and these are all gnawed open actual walnuts. So I'm going to pour that it's hard to really give an example, but it's really cool when these open up. It gives a real beautiful fleshy tan color. But I thought it'd be a kind of a cool contrast in a bowl to have the actual solid walnut wood on one side and then the walnut seeds on the other side. So that's a work in progress. I'm getting to it, just waiting for drier time.
Are you planning clear,
actually,
clear on the other side?
you can never measure out exactly perfectly. So I actually had a bunch of green that I had mixed up for something previously that I made. So I poured the green in here because it's going to catch all the holes that are in the walnuts. Yeah. But I actually intend to pour this more than likely blue.
Oh, okay.
Just to give it a little bit of a contrast of the blue and the green. In my mind, I like those colors with walnut. It just looks good to me. So,
Yeah.
So it's just kind of something that I'll be working on in the very near future.
And this piece right here with that green?
Yes.
Yeah. Was that just
This was a gone awry. It's actually a Banksia pod, which is, for lack of a better term, the Australian pine cone. But it has all kinds of openings in the side. Good, I do have. So this is actually what it looks like, and those are a bunch of openings. And once you actually pour that with the epoxy, it fills in all those holes, and it opens up really cool. So I was trying to do this, let it all seep in, but then it kicked off to the side and threw everything off, so I could never actually get it perfectly squared back up to put it back onto the actual lathe to turn it.
Yeah. Makes sense. Now, I also, shows.
Yeah, so these are actually some seashells that have basically been sliced. So they're the cone style seashells. And that is a true rose that actually our niece gave my wife. So I was trying to memorialize that. So it's actually got a rose inside the center. Something I never turned because I did do quite a few seashells. And these are all super duper teeny tiny little seashells. And I actually, this is when I mentioned the lady that I got the medal from on the stoppers. She actually ordered 2 of these from me. But what I learned, they are incredibly fierce on your tools. Literally destroy them. They're so hard that it actually, so I was a little scared to really destroy this having meaning. So I'm just kind of keeping it memorialized as the actual epoxy pour. So
Yeah. Anything else that we should talk about before we turn around and check out some of your finished work, or what's your next?
I think that covers without getting too deep. But if you have questions, you can hit my page and ask me questions or anything that you would like, and I'd be very happy to answer those.
So what we're going to do is turn around here to see some of the finished work that you got, and Beth and I own pieces. Actually, we own just one piece because the other one was a gift.
Correct.
And but tell us what we got here.
Sure. So of course, when I started doing shows, there wasn't really displays or anything that I could just go out and buy. So I kind of started coming up with my own display pieces. So created all these, turned a lot of the bases, different things, and that's kind of where the business side started taking over, and I had to figure out a way to present it to the public. So of course, being very important.
Love the
business card
holder.
So you turned the business card holder as well, right?
Correct.
Yep.
So out of necessity, I had to find a way to display them because they're not something that's common. So I've made probably 20 different displays before I was finally happy, because a lot of them laid down. But I realized the higher up, the easier it was for people to look at. So you just kind of play around with things. But
so in 2018, you buy a lathe. Probably a pretty big investment.
Fortunately, it was a Christmas present, but I wanted to make sure that I was comfortable with it.
Yeah.
So it was actually a really small, little, simple lathe that I knew that I could play around with without putting a huge investment out there.
Yeah.
It's not cheap. I mean, there's so many tools, there's so many different things, safety gear, different things that you definitely need to have when you're doing this. So, but yeah, a lot of my stoppers here, they were my bread and butter. That's basically what I displayed at all my first shows, because I hadn't really delved into the rest of the stuff. But as all artists, we kind of grow over time and want to learn a new process. So it just kind of built up from smaller things like the little stoppers to then I wanted to start, well, let's try a small bowl. and I've made some pretty decently sized bowls, but you're limited by the size of your lathe on how big you can actually turn. So
yeah, and my mind really hadn't gone to talking about the business aspect before, but I mean, you jumped in. It's 2020. 2 years ago, you buy a lathe, start turning, and now you find yourself in business doing this and driving a good deal of income from it. I mean, how did that work? And I know that Heather, and just from getting to know you guys a little bit, that Heather is a lot on the business end, right? And so how does that work together, and where did you go from turning to selling?
Like I said, I had kind of started off just showing people at work, and they would be like, hey, how much is that? But then obviously starting out and wanting to go to a show, we realized, hey, there's a whole huge medium of the internet that we can actually adapt to too. And my wife actually does eBay sales for a local company. So she basically takes the pictures of the products, lists them on eBay, and from there she would start grabbing each of my pieces and just slowly start building up that eBay page. And that started taking hold a little bit and a little bit more, and then all of a sudden you get a sale to somebody in Las Vegas or somebody in California, and they start seeing your reviews, and it just kind of built from there. So that exposure was all due to my lovely wife. So believing in what I do and always being supportive and allowing me to kind of grow and expand, and she's been a very integral part in what I do. So
We're a team.
I'm kind of quiet, may not sound like it tonight, but once you get me talking, I'll talk. But she loves to sell. That's just what she's always done, and that's what she actually enjoys doing. So she liked my stuff so much that she feels very comfortable portraying that to the public and helping me get my words out there. That
Yeah.
So
if you have any questions for Kurt, or you have even business questions, you're like, okay, where do you sell? You know, what do you find? Ask those as well. Talk to us about a couple of your favorite pieces here, and I mean, if I walk up, I'm like, oh, this edge here,
yeah,
that really speaks to me. I really like the grain here, and so when you choose wood or epoxy or whatever, where does it go from a piece of wood to something you sell?
I learned a really big lesson when I first started turning. A gentleman found me at one of my shows, and he had actually collected a cut down tree from his parents' house. They unfortunately had passed away, but all the kids planted that tree when they were really little. Well, they're all actually retired now or working towards retirement, so that much of a span of time. The parents unfortunately passed away, but he saved these 3 logs from that tree. It just looked like plain bark, white wood, nothing too exciting. Well, he actually commissioned me to do 16 bowls, 20 keychains, and 3 Christmas ornaments, and they gave all those out to the kids as a remembrance, and everybody in the family as a remembrance of the parents, grandparents that had recently passed away, unfortunately. But when I opened up that wood, it was rainbow poplar. So what I thought was going to be this boring grain, just, okay, I'll just make a few things and hopefully it'll be pretty. Once I opened it up, there was literally streaks of purple, orange. So I learned to never judge a piece of wood until you actually open it up. So
and that to me, I mean, that resonates, because that's just not, I'm not talking about the rainbow poplar. Yes, that is, but you took heritage wood and you turned it into art that'll not only outlive the family, but that'll be passed down from generations, saying, yeah, this came from wood that was, you know, part of the grandparents', you know, yard, which was planted. And yeah, that is,
it was one of the most touching projects I've ever done, and we actually still talk today often. So it kind of made a connection for us that he trusted me as a new turner, that somebody he just met at a show, to say, hey, I have this wood that's important to me. I love what you're doing. I'd like you to make some stuff for my family. I didn't know that in the first portion of it. He didn't tell me that until much later, that it was going to be gifts to everybody.
Ooh.
He just asked me to make a bunch of bowls for him.
Yeah.
So it became a touching thing that ended up being a huge story that we both interacted with on our Facebook pages. But it was touching for the sentiment. It was really amazing to get that opportunity. And actually, if you saw Roger's post from earlier today on the actual site, there's the bowl at the top that has the black intermingled grain to it. That was actually a piece of wood that he had cut down from his house. It wasn't as sentimental of a situation, but it was his wood that he had saved from his house, and he asked me to do another project for him.
Wow.
So that was actually a project piece that I had worked on for him. And so, but truly, you never know what's underneath the grain of wood. This was just, when I opened this up, it was all bark. When I got this, straight bark. Once I actually turned the outside off, this is all insect holes. So where insects have literally crawled through and eaten the wood. And once I saw that, I kind of sanded it down and I said, I'm going to save this later and I'm going to fill this with epoxy and actually have all those holes be exposed with the epoxy. Not sure what color yet. You can throw out a suggestion if you
There
want
you
to.
go.
Yeah. What do you want to see out there?
Yeah.
Because I'm really hard deciding whether to stay neutral or go something wild like a turquoise or something of that
Yeah.
nature. So, which one of the other bowls that you had showed in that
Had epoxy.
had the
That was
epoxy.
well,
It was
yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Piece.
thank you. Which that was turquoise that was in that picture, and I'm really kind of partial to that. I really like the,
Oh, it looks
the
great.
intermingling of that color.
Oh
So,
yeah, the juxtaposition of the bark and the turquoise pop is just incredible.
Now, you had also talked about one of the pieces that we bought, if I remember correctly, you said that you brought out the woods and that there were some minerals that had seeped into the wood from
Yeah.
just where it was laying, right? And
Correct.
so tell us just quick about that. Do you have anything there that's...
nothing too drastic.
Hard, 'cause we bought 'em.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yes, they
They're
are
in
actually
my
very, very
house.
popular pieces. This is the beginning, and basically what that's called is spalting.
Okay.
So this is by no means as pronounced, but you'll see if you can see the dark grains that are coming out here. That's not inherently in the wood, and the red there is something that's not naturally in the wood. But that actually forms over a period of time, and it's something that's drawn out of the ground, basically, that changes the color. And some are less pronounced, some are more pronounced. But I had a bunch of this wood. Some is actually amazing. I think, 2 days ago you had posted the actual piece that had the red in that.
Yeah.
That it's called a crotch, but it's basically where the two limbs of the tree start to V out. But that was incredibly pronounced with the red. This is actually a piece of that same group of logs.
Yeah.
But there's that much variance from one piece to the next, so you
Yeah,
never
because
know.
I can see you can see the red here. I don't know if you can see it
Oh yeah.
in addition to the
How
spalting. Is that how you
large
said?
was that piece when you started working on it?
Sure. Some guys can afford the bigger stuff. I choose to just stick with my chainsaw. So literally what I do is I take the log, take my chainsaw, slice it straight down the center of, like if the tree was standing. And so this bowl, I would say, is roughly about 7.5, maybe 8 inches around, somewhere in that range. I probably started with a piece of wood that was square. So I'd say probably 10 inches. Because what you have to take into account for is the wings that come off that square portion once you're rounding it. So,
Cool.
but yeah, it probably started out roughly about a 10 inch by 10 inch square.
But
So,
not enormous. Like you're not taking too,
Correct.
depending on the bowl that you're making or the piece that you're making, I would assume.
Correct,
But
correct.
okay.
yeah, and the size of your lathe is limiting. It's called a swing, but it's basically the half height between the bed of the lathe and the
I'll
actual
tell you what, that
portion.
feels
Oh,
natural to walk
sure.
us up, huh?
I think that's a good idea.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I can explain that a little bit better outside.
Yeah, so we're gonna walk up and go out to the garage where the magic happens, right? There's
yeah.
magic.
Check
down
out
here.
the other portion of what I do.
Let me disconnect the.
Yeah. So if you have any, let us know. Beth is unhooking the microphone, so
We're trying
we'll
to.
turn up our voices just a bit, and we're gonna go out to the garage. And while we go out, you know, let's not talk. Let's just move in and folks
Traverse.
Yeah, follow us up and maybe shoot a question up. Oh, there's not a step there.
Nope.
There's not a step there.
Okay.
Sorry, light would help.
No, that's
No,
fine.
it's fine.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Actually, it looks kind of nice coming out into the dark and watching the door come up with the lit and everything. So.
Oh, guys, this is not going to be awkward, but it was raining, so in case we have any spots
Looks
there.
good.
No specs.
No
Okay.
spots.
No spots. No spots.
Oh, it smells good in here.
So,
Here you can
Yeah.
really get a good idea. When I go hunting out in the woods or hunting on Facebook Marketplace for free firewood, this is where it all comes back to. So a lot of people don't necessarily realize, they think that it's something that's a final product that just sits there. They don't realize it starts out as truly a log.
yeah, yeah.
So
Now, when you go out, what wood do you lean towards? And it's probably because the different, you have a favorite grain or softness or
characteristics of the wood you learn over time, like the one with the red in it, that is a form of maple. Maple is very prone to being super duper soft in that form, and it's very hard to turn. What I found I love the most is actually black walnut, which is the larger logs here. These are probably about 2.5 foot wide. No real organization. I just grab a piece of wood and start cutting when I'm ready to turn. But this piece here was the same size as those when I first started. And then I start just cutting off chunks. And so after you cut it up with the chainsaw, you get down to a piece something like this. And at that point, that's when you mount it on the lathe and start doing the rest of the work. So there's a lot of process to it, but you really have to kind of search and find what you like the best. And there's certain woods that I try and like, all right, that's not as interesting as I thought. But.
So is it kind of like a geode, where you coming from that geology where you're like, oh, I've got this piece of wood, and then you kind of crack it open, and you're like, whoa, look what I found.
It really is, because like I said, you really can't judge by the cover. I've found some wood that just looks really extremely boring, and then you open it up once you start turning it on the lathe, and sorry to jump around here.
No.
But let's see. The bowl with the turquoise in it, this is some of the spalting. So these are all things you can't really see from a surface value when you're just looking at the actual slice of a log. But once you start opening it up, there's just surprises every time. You just really never know what's going to be inside of it. So,
Do you always know when you start working with the wood, do you always know, and again, you're mathematical and you're creative, how often do you know what you're doing, and how often do you let the wood tell you what you're doing?
that's where I let the artist side take over.
Okay.
This is the mechanical side. The technical side is getting it down to a workable piece.
Mm-hmm.
I can say honestly, in almost 2 years of turning, I have gone into a project with a final idea, and that's only because of the shape of what I was putting into the epoxy, of what I wanted it to be. Actually, my cousin asked me to make a fantasy football league trophy for them. So I actually made a huge football out of burl.
Wow.
And poured the epoxy in between it, so it was clear in the center of the football. So that was really the only thing that I ever really delved into that I knew, okay, this has to look like a football. But most of the time I throw it on the lathe to start turning, and I don't have a final end goal necessarily until I start to see what it opens up as.
Okay.
Maybe there's a pocket in it that you want to keep. Maybe there's a pocket you want to get rid of. So
And here's your lathe.
this is the original where it all started. So
the
this is my
grandpa.
little guy.
So this was your 2018?
Correct.
Okay.
So this is a nice little, about $150 lathe for anybody that is interested. So it's something very functional for turning smaller stuff. But very quickly I found it didn't have the power to turn bowls. It didn't have the size capacity. And when I said swing earlier, what I mean is it spins right here at this center point, facing outward. So the inside of the bowl would be kind of C-shaped out here, and this would be the bottom of it. So the swing is the height from here to here, and obviously if you're starting with a square piece, it has to be even smaller because you have to get rid of those wings before. So it just really limits.
In terms of mathematical or geometry, it's radius, right? I mean, your radius, your bottom of your bowl it's limiting, right?
Exactly.
Especially with,
Yeah, so this is a 3rd horsepower, and it has a 6-inch swing. So basically you have about 3 inches to play with here at the bottom. At that point, I realized power was going to be much more important as I moved forward. So this is actually kind of in the wood turning realm. Laguna is actually kind of like the Cadillac, or getting towards the Porsche level of lathes.
So this is a Laguna
Revo 1216.
So for your wood turners, I mean, as you go into your fake closed groups, they're the ones that say, yeah, that's the one that...
That's the one that a lot of people were going to recognize and go, yeah. There's a lot of other names, don't get me wrong.
Right.
And there's, I mean, the amazing ones that are $4,000 plus for the lathe. But this one is a full horsepower motor. And
1/3?
1/3
to 4?
To 1 horsepower.
Oh, 1 horsepower.
1 horsepower.
Okay.
Drastic difference though,
Yeah.
when you're trying to turn a chunk as big as that piece of walnut, which was almost 11 inches across roughly. So you need that power to be able to dig through the actual.
Now you step up to this.
Correct.
Beth, you want to
Yeah.
show the...
This is just kind of
Actually,
a scrap piece that I abandoned.
Turn the lights off, actually.
Yeah.
There, it's...
So this is a scrap piece that I ended up abandoning just because it got really out of whack. When I'm collecting wood, usually wood that you work with is going to be dry that you go out and buy. But obviously this may have just been cut down and it's super wet and the wood flexes a lot as it's drying out. But just to kind of show how it sits, keep all my tools very close because obviously at 1 horsepower, if I'm reaching across this and my clothes catch on this as it's spinning, people have ripped off hands, people have ripped off fingers. So I'm not saying it's inherently dangerous, but you have to be very careful of what you're doing and very aware of what you're doing. So, but the gentleman that actually had introduced me to turning when I was 13, he had actually, his son saw that I started turning and he called me up and offered me tons of wood because due to health problems, he unfortunately had to stop. And at that point, he saw some potential in me and said, I want you to take this wood, or literally he said, I'm going to throw it in a fire pit. So, but by the time I got there, he had other things. These are all the tools that he used as he was turning throughout his many years of turning. And he said, please take those too, because I started off with these little chintzy little guys down here.
Oh, that was your original?
That was my original set, and literally I would just sit with a little twig.
Now, are there some wood, I would imagine there's wood turners that make their own tools too. They're like, I do like this and we're going to machine our tips and handles.
Now, I have seen people actually take literally pipe and pound that down to a flat point and sit with a grinder and create the actual edges that you need. I was fortunate not to have to go that direction, but I'm ingenuitive enough that I would probably delve down that direction if it came down to it, because actually with the more power, when this is what I'm working with to turn a little piece of wood this size, then I step up to the bowl. Everything, I know this is kind of an odd angle, but everything has to rest on this. And you have a constant, I'll just turn this on for a second to kind of show you. So this is spinning. And literally, you're literally holding the chisel and you're dragging it around to change shape or go into the center of the piece. Turn that off while I'm looking away. But basically you have that inertia that's constantly pulling, so you have to keep that angle down. So when I started off with the little, I actually ended up turning my own handles on these because I wanted that extra support. So if I get something that's really digging down, you can literally almost go like this if you had to. You shouldn't.
Yeah.
But it just gives you that extra leverage.
Yeah.
So, but everything really was because when I started turning, this is basically the same tool, just a much smaller version. When I'm doing my little stoppers and things of that nature, these are phenomenal. Bowls need to go bigger.
So when you're turning, and is it epoxy, like a resin? When you turn that, what's the? I would imagine that turns. I'm guessing, right? Is the, I mean, what would you call it? The softness of the resin? Is it easier to turn resin compared to wood, or like if you've got a wood and resin piece and you're kind of going into both?
One would think that. The epoxy will actually stay in a ribbon. So as it's coming off, I kind of left all my sawdust here from earlier in the day because I was working on a piece. But this is kind of how the epoxy will tend to come off. That just, once it starts going and it gets rounded off, this will literally wrap everything. But the difference in the wood from the epoxy is the wood's forgiving. It'll kind of chip away if you have a problem area that grabs your chisel or something. The epoxy will literally shatter. So finesse is key with the epoxy. You have to be really soft with it and never go aggressively. You have to go real smooth and real soft with it. So,
Yeah.
But not to delve too deep into that process. I know I could go all day on
that. And that's of interest to me too. Tell us a little bit about the wood over here.
Sure.
This looks like, you know, my untrained knowledge of lathe turning. This looks like this is about ready to turn, right?
Yes. So again, this is some of the wood that my buddy's dad had actually offered. So he does glue ups, different things. Imagine the time that it took to literally cut every single one of those pieces of wood, glue them together, also planing them down so you don't have any gaps in between the wood. He had tons of these pieces, but he actually did a lot of art turning too. I said he did the baseball bats and everything.
Yeah.
That was kind of a family business. But he also did it as an artistic thing, and he actually did shows, so I got a lot of information from him too. So, but he did huge, beautiful vases.
And there's all kinds of great.
So it's kind of hard with the light here, but he would actually do
gorgeous
different inlays, and then when you open that up, you get, of course, different things opening up in different spots depending on the shape that you take it to. So. And not to go to the morbid side, but he actually got to the point where people were asking him to do ash urns for their deceased family members. So he actually, this is hollow on the inside that he glued up to already be prepared to make something of that nature. So just a leftover piece, not to go.
But how cool! Well, but how cool, especially if you do have a tree and to have it come from your yard and then to be used like that, even if it's for a pet or a family member.
Exactly.
But that's really neat.
Give us a couple just beginner ideas. Like if you're like, hey, I kind of like working with wood, or yeah, I've got a lathe in the garage, or I got one from my grandfather or my father. This kind of intrigues me. Where do I start? What would your step 1, step 2, maybe even step 3?
Step 1, find a lathe. Don't compromise. It sounds silly, but if you even have the slightest level of obsession with it, like I knew I was going to, go ahead and invest straight out. Just get yourself a good lathe. You're saving your money, saving yourself money in the long run, and a lot of heartache of trying to learn on something that's not powerful enough. So, or do your research and find a cheaper one that you know will suit your needs. The next biggest thing is the chisels. So get yourself a decent set of chisels and learn the sharpening process is key because they go dull like that. You're literally talking miles of wood with how fast it's spinning that it's touching every couple seconds. So especially if you're up to like 2,000 RPM, of course, that's a lot of surface area being touched. The key thing that I learned from my buddy when I went to see him and he offered me the wood is after all those years, he did not use a respirator. So sanding wood, turning wood, face shield. He always wore safety glasses, but he didn't wear a respirator. He got incredibly sick, and basically the doctors at that point told him that his lungs looked worse than a person that smokes 2 packs a day for their entire life due to the damage that the wood caused. So I'm going to go ahead and say respirator is literally the biggest thing. And I'm not trying to scare anybody away. I'm just trying to give a key point of information that I wish that I would have known because I stood out here in the beginning without this until I actually spoke to him. So I ingested all of that.
Because you're not thinking, I mean, you're just playing with wood.
Fortunately,
you're not
it was only a
about
couple
it.
months before he contacted me, so it was just a couple of months in very small pieces. But if I can save somebody that health issue in the future, get yourself a good respirator. That way you're not breathing all that dust because it does actually really destroy your lungs if you let it get in there. So,
And I'm going to ask Heather a question. Heather, what is a couple things that people should know about like the business side of things? Like where do you find places to display, or do you put stuff? Where do you put it up?
Well, we do have our eBay page. It's my go-to because that's what I know. I do it for my 9-to-5 job, so it was an easy transition. I do know there's other medias out there, Marketplace on Facebook and Etsy, but eBay's it's
been pretty good.
It's been all right. Yeah, it's been wonderful, and it's really great when you can say, you know, people all across this country now has this wonderful man's art, and it just means so much. You can always go to the Turning Junction Facebook, and if you see something you like there, you can message us because we do PayPal and we do Square Up, and that is a godsend. It's amazing the technologies that are available out to you now. We can go to shows, flea markets all over Ohio, and we can take your credit card and just swipe it and insert the chips.
In the middle of a field.
In the middle of a field.
It's amazing.
Walk away with artwork.
And yeah,
It's amazing.
and have a beautiful piece of your own.
But where did you find a lot of our shows at? Because you would join actually a lot of Facebook groups with that.
There's
too,
tons of Facebook groups specific for certain areas too. Like I've joined a ton just for Ohio. I've joined a ton specific for Canton, Northeast Ohio. We even bought a book for Northeastern Ohio shows for
literally lists every show in Ohio.
Yeah.
But it's something compiled by one person that they put out every year. Unfortunately, this year took a tragic turn due to our situation and what's going on as far as the COVID situation. But so we had a lot of shows that were lined up that we were excited about that unfortunately got canceled. But that is what everybody is experiencing. So we took it in stride and we focused more on our eBay page and different things. So
is it kind of like a Deadhead concert where like people pack up their stuff and they move to one place and like, hey, and you see your fellow artists, and then you're like, oh, where are you going? And you're like, oh yeah, I'll see you in Pennsylvania, or I'll see you here, and you follow certain artists around?
Not intentionally,
Right.
but it was amazing. Like I said, we did a show every weekend, if not one on Saturday and Sunday, being 2 different separate shows. Not as frequently, but we did do that before. How many people that you would start to see in that same circuit because they know what shows do good, they know what shows have done well in the past. But as new, that was when we first started, was last May, doing our shows. To keep seeing the same faces told me that we were probably she was choosing the best shows to enter us into. Seeing those same people recurring at the and I've made some great friends.
Absolutely.
There's a gentleman that does strictly pen turning, and I can't even tell you how beautiful some of his pens are. They're ornate and should be hundreds of dollars for the quality of what he makes.
Yeah.
But he does strictly pens. A lot of vendors, the people that were hosting the shows, were afraid to put us together because they think turning is turning.
Right.
We found
that you dilute
That
each
would be
other's audience.
Exactly.
competition,
Yep.
or there'd be some
but
animosity or
we
something.
saw each other's artwork and we're like, awesome, dude, I hope you do a fantastic,
Yes.
and good luck to you. And then we'd start seeing each other at the same show. And actually at Peninsula, he was set up there at one of the shows that we were at. I don't think it was the one that we met you at, but the lady that hosts that, Carol, was like, I'm afraid to have two wood turners there. I'm like, no, I know this guy. We work
We're
great
good
together.
friends.
Yeah.
It's
And
cool because
pens
if I have
aren't
something,
bowls.
Yeah,
Exactly,
it's just totally different.
Yeah, you get the bowl for the wife, you get the pen for the husband, and you move on with yourself.
and like I maybe had 2 or 3 pens that I would turn, and he would have maybe 3 or 4 stoppers. He didn't do his own epoxy work, if I remember correctly, so he would buy them and turn them. But once he started seeing my stuff, he's like, I don't even want to compete with you. I'm not going to put out my stoppers. So I gave the same respect. Not that my pens could have compared to his, to be quite honest, but we gave each other that respect of, you know, okay, this is your realm. I'm not going to compete with you on that, and he didn't compete with me on my side.
Yeah.
And it's just a mutual respect. So
Fabulous.
Yeah. Some of our best customers are other vendors.
yeah. We've
Yeah.
had shows
They
that
appreciate
were
the artistry.
yeah.
and
we've
what
had
it
shows
took
that
to
were
create.
rough as far as the actual customer turnout, as far as people actually coming from the outside into it.
It's been ugly sometimes.
And we've had
Sure.
vendors actually be our only sale at those shows at certain times.
Well, because we artists
So-
appreciate
Yeah, they
Exactly.
knew
work that's
Yeah.
well
what
done,
took
and you're like,
into
we
it,
gotta, we can't leave until we
They're
get.
like, yeah,
Yep.
yeah, no. Oh, my daughter's having a wedding. And I think that'd be a great gift.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of cool to you build a camaraderie over time. You actually see the same people quite often, and it's a cool community.
Do you do much marketing? So the majority of your online work is through eBay. Do you do much marketing to drive to eBay?
I
Or
promote a lot on Facebook.
on Facebook?
A lot on
Okay.
And
Facebook,
Twitter.
and then I'm on Twitter and Instagram
Mm-hmm.
as well. And you try to get that name out there as much as possible. And
The more people see it, the more opportunity you get. But
Have you found a platform? Because there's always there's the different audience for Twitter. There's a different audience for Instagram. Facebook is entirely different. Have you found one for this? You know, because for your 9-to-5 job, that's a different thing than for, you know, handmade art like that. Is
Right,
there
it's
one platform?
totally different ball game, and it's hard. And I'm always open to any suggestions anybody has, because we're still
fledgling.
yeah,
in this,
in its
so
infancy. You know.
Yep.
We've got lucky. We found places that work for us, and we go back to those places. But we were just kind of getting taken off, and then everything happened this year where we
Right.
had things planned out for this year, and then things changed a lot. So we were just kind of getting our feet really solidly on the ground.
And then somebody pulled the carpet.
Yeah.
But
So
it's-
on eBay, is it Turning Junction on eBay? I'm trying to remember how I
They
don't go
wouldn't
on
allow
eBay
us to do
very
spaces.
often.
It's
Oh, okay.
literally the asterisk, no space, turning, no space, asterisk,
Okay.
junction. So the turning junction
Gotcha.
with asterisks in between
Okay.
the 2 words. So
Or if you go to our Facebook page, there's an icon that you can just click, and it'll send you right to it.
Perfect. Okay.
I'll tell you what, you guys have been generous with your knowledge. You've taken us, you shared your basement, your space, your garage. I'm kind of digging the whole wood thing.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I love the whole come to a piece of wood that you lift out of the ground and create artwork that'll outlive us. And the stories about the heritage wood and getting wood. A lot of people don't think about that.
Yeah.
And I didn't think about it until you shared that story. If you found this of value, please share it to your friends. Next week, if you do share it, your name will be in a drawing, and we'll give away that stopper. Unfortunately, I can't win it, even if I share it, because but it's wonderful. And Thank you, Kurt and Heather, for sharing what you do. It's pretty amazing, and you've kind of spurred a lot of thoughts and using curiosities and knowledge that I didn't have before. I want to thank you for that.
Roger,
Absolutely.
Beth, I really want to say thank you too for seeing something in my art that you appreciated too. So I appreciate you coming and visiting us and giving me a chance to tell you a little bit about what I do. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Hey, next week we are interviewing Macklin Bilski. Macklin Bilski was on the world's #1 podcast called Impulsive in LA. And he and the guys that were there, they were interviewing some of the top names around the world. And he decided to come back to Cleveland, which is where his roots are for, and pursue art, and taking his art and his voice, right, in music and poetry and painting and everything, and kind of step away from LA and come here. So we're interviewing Macklin next week, and so that's going to be real interesting. So anybody who shares, tune in next week. Enjoy Tuesday at 7 if you want to, because we're connecting artists of all different areas. But next week, Macklin will actually pull the winner. Macklin Bilski will actually pull the winner of this week's giveaway. So so join us next week. It'll be a great one.
Yeah.
Guys, have a great week.
So join the Tuesday at 7 Facebook group, and don't forget that this will, if this is too far after tonight, you can go to the Tuesday at 7 channel on YouTube and be able to find this video to rewatch it and share even more with your friends and family.
Yep. We upload Tuesday at 7 over to YouTube just because it's easier to search there. So I think there's 70 or 80 interviews, videos, how-tos out on YouTube. And then for those who have been kind of tuning in, we're going to be continuing to do demos. We have a couple private Facebook groups. If you're wanting to jump into some of the things, we have music, we have body painting, we have improv,
marketing.
We have marketing. We have Joe Jensen, who is also doing Rituals for Creatives, and Jess, who's also a published author, who's talking about how to work through anxiety and depression and to keep in that production mode. And so those are going to be some things that that you'll have the opportunity to join. Really, it's going to be, those Facebook groups are going to be starting and running from now until probably sometime in December. So keep an eye on that as well. Oh, if you want to take a look at any of those replays, beathrivingartist.com. Those are places you'll be able to click into those demos as well. Guys, thank you for spending your Tuesday evening with us. If you're not watching live and you're watching this recorded, maybe 10 or 20 years from now, you'll be able to say it's 2020, it's in the pandemic, and we're still trying to connect, and
we made it to October.
Right, maybe this year's gonna be over pretty soon. But again, thanks guys.